Plus, if the attraction did experience downtime, then the ratio of reservation-based guests to standby riders could simply be adjusted to favor those that had reservations during the downtime. Despite the idea coming from the initial reservation-based concept, what Laval was proposing was closer to a virtual queue. A virtual queue functions similarly to a normal queue, just without the physical line. A common example of a virtual queue can be found in many quick-service restaurants, in which guests take a number and wait for their number to be called. Unlike reservations, this still retains the first-come, first-served nature of a physical line, but it removes the ability to visualize the wait, therefore increasing the quality of it. After returning from vacation, Laval pitched the concept to other executives, but he was met with skepticism. Believing in the idea, Laval proposed that he test the concept to prove that it could work. Using the newly opened Animal Kingdom due to its limited amount of attractions, testing began with a select group of guests who were given paper diaries to keep track of their day, including how long they waited in line. The test subjects were split into two groups, a control group and a group that would use the virtual queue system. The control group simply logged their day at the park.
Thank you.
The other group
Sorry about that. I paused for dinner. My
Streamlabs
Streamlabs crashed.
would hand them a ticket with a return time on it. This return time was equal to the time that it would have taken guests to wait in line for the ride. The test subjects were then encouraged to explore the park and return at the time listed on the ticket, where they would then be allowed to skip the line. The test was a huge success. The virtual queue subjects were able to experience 25% more rides than the control group, and their wait times were reduced by 50%. The virtual queue subjects left the park much more satisfied and far more likely to return than the control group. If this was not convincing enough for executives, the test also showed that those using the virtual queue system spent more of their time at gift shops and dining locations, resulting in more spending when compared to the control group. Executives approved the concept for further testing, which continued throughout early 1999, both at Disneyland and Walt Disney World. That summer, testing focused on Space Mountain at the Magic Kingdom, which often had the park's longest wait. In these early tests, cast members were physically writing return times on cards and giving them to guests, while using handheld clicker counters to keep track of how many were handed out and how many guests returned. The tests were often haphazard and chaotic, but they were successful enough to prove that not only the system could work, but it would make guests happier and more likely to spend money. Many within the company, including Laval, felt that the system should be free and available to all visitors so as not to create different classes of park guests. Citing Walt Disney himself, who was known to wait in the park's lines with his guests. With the test labeled a success, executives approved the permanent installation of the new virtual queue system, officially titled
Hey! Did you know that you don't have to wait in line to ride some of your favorite attractions? Just look for the signs of selected attractions and insert your You'll get a complimentary Fast Pass with a return ride time stamped right on it.
Guests who entered a Walt Disney World park in late 1999 were met with a brand new system, Fast Pass. On the surface, the system was simple. Guests would approach an attraction where they would be able to view the posted standby wait time. If this was manageable, they could join the standby queue right away. However, if the wait was too long, they could instead choose to receive a Fast Pass at the kiosk placed outside of the attraction. Guests inserted their park admission ticket into the kiosk to receive their Fast Pass with a 1-hour return window listed on it. They could then enjoy the rest of the park, and once their return window arrived, they would hand their ticket to an attendant and enter the Fast Pass queue, boarding the attraction with a minimal wait. Each guest could only hold one Fast Pass at a time, and they could not receive another until their return window had arrived. Behind the scenes, the system was far more complex. Each attraction's Fast Pass data would be stored on a local computer housed in each attraction, controlling the standby wait time display, keeping track of how many Fast Passes have been handed out, and determining the return times being printed on each Fast Pass. The computer was connected to a server so all wait times could be monitored throughout the park, and so that the system would know when a guest had already been given a Fast Pass to prevent them from obtaining another. The system also allowed ride operators to tell the computer when an attraction was experiencing downtime, and in response, the kiosk would slow down or cease dispersing Fast Passes until the attraction was operating again. Some cast members reported this feature not working properly or not implemented on some rides, resulting in ride operators having to go to the Fast Pass kiosk, manually disperse a stack of paper Fast Passes so that return times were pushed back, and then immediately throw those Fast Passes in the trash. When news broke on Fast Pass in the summer of 1999, Laval said, quote, "We are going to use it on 3, 4, or 5 attractions that historically have the longest lines at each park." By the end of the year, 13 attractions at Walt Disney World utilized Fast Pass, 5 at Magic Kingdom, 2 at Epcot, 5 at Disney MGM, and 3 at Animal Kingdom. In early 2000, FastPass was implemented in Disneyland on 3 attractions: Space Mountain, Splash Mountain, and Roger Rabbit's Cartoon Spin, with plans to expand the program.
One way to keep it moving is called Disney's FastPass. Mi un favorito. Check this out. You roll up to the FastPass kiosk, boom, boom, kicks back your ride time. Then you just come back to the ride at that time and giddy up. Pretty sweet little invention. Let's hit it.
FastPass was a huge learning curve for guests. Despite heavy marketing, many guests did not know about the program, and even fewer understood it. In the early days, it was referred to as Disney's best-kept secret, and many guests waiting in standby lines were visibly and vocally frustrated to see priority being given to those that had FastPasses, believing that they were being skipped or cut in line, which, in a way, they were. Some people believed that FastPass was simply holding their place in the attractions line, which is not the case. The FastPass kiosk and ticket system was a virtual queue, so there was a first-come, first-served system built into the program, but that just determined guest return windows. Once guests redeemed their pass, that queue was over, and they were admitted to a new preferred queue that shared the service rate of the attraction with the standby line. The arrival of FastPass guests did affect the rate at which guests moved through the standby queue. There were a few exceptions to this, such as with Space Mountain at the Magic Kingdom, which has 2 separate tracks. So, if operated as such, one track could be standby only, and the other could be FastPass only. If this is the case, then FastPass guests are not skipping or cutting the standby line, they essentially just have their own attraction, as there are 2 separate service rates, and the arrival of FastPass guests have no impact on the standby line. The main issues with implementing FastPass beyond the learning curve for guests was perfecting the technology for the kiosks and finding space in each attraction for 2 lines. Luckily, many attractions already had 2 lines, and guests were given the choice of either the left line or the right line when they entered. A common advice from vacation planners was to always go left, because the majority of people are right-handed and thus tended to go right, a phenomenon found outside of Disney's parks and studied by queuing experts for some time. Some attractions already had a split point, but not until later on in their queue. For instance, Space Mountain at Walt Disney World had a wide single-line hallway up to the ramp leading to the main show building. Here, a railing was added and all guests had to go to the right side, so that cast members could walk on the left. This made installing FastPass fairly simple, because Disney only needed to extend the railing to the beginning of the queue and build a staircase to the entrance so the left side and the right side remained split the entire time. Reviews from those guests that used FastPass were overwhelmingly positive. On average, guests that utilized the system waited 75% less throughout the day. A few skeptics believed that the system would increase standby waits significantly throughout the park. Laval responded to this concern saying, quote, "It's only a problem if they don't self-select. The only challenge has been getting people to understand FastPass." He added that, quote, "People go on to what you might consider the secondary attractions in that area of the ride they have FastPass for. We found that these were typically attractions that they didn't go on before because they were spending too much time in line. This does increase rides per capita by backfilling less attended attractions." FastPass also had the potential, in certain situations, to reduce standby wait times, because it altered the arrival rate of popular attractions. By giving guests return windows, it spread out arrivals more evenly throughout the day, flattening the midday rush and reducing standby waits during this peak period. Those that loved FastPass argued that the system should be added to all of the rides in the park. Dale Stafford, VP of Operations Planning and Development for Walt Disney World, believed that this was not practical, saying, quote, "If you did it everywhere, you wouldn't have enough space in the park. Where would everyone go?" 1 year after FastPass was introduced, both guests and Disney officials were confident in labeling the program a massive success. Eisner said, quote, "They now have more time to spend money and to do other things. They're also a lot happier not having to wait in line." In August of 2000, FastPass was recognized by the Florida Engineering Society and was awarded a 2000 Governor's New Product Award. Laval said, quote, "FastPass continues to exceed our guest expectations. It's a free service and it's making their time in the parks more fun and productive." Laval retired in 2000 after 30 years with the company, with FastPass being his last major project. Perhaps the greatest success of FastPass was the name. It was catchy and concise, so much so that it immediately became a household name and a colloquialism for any sort of expedited line. It also pushed other parks to develop their own expedited queue systems, and it even inspired a hit song.
If you like it, then you shoulda got a fast pass. If you like it, then you shoulda got a fast pass. Don't want you hate on me because you came in last. If you like it, then you shoulda got a fast pass.
It was not long until touring experts started to learn the best practices for the FastPass system. For instance, guests still needed to arrive earlier in the day to receive fast passes with optimal return times. If a guest arrived at the park's opening, they could receive a fast pass with the return window only an hour away. However, by midday, many fast pass return times could be 4 to 5 hours in the future, and on busier days, fast passes for popular attractions would run out by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. While the system itself worked well, there were a few issues. One was the decision to not allow guests to receive another fast pass until the return window arrived. This left many guests upset when they went to get a fast pass for an attraction, only to realize that the return window was hours away and they could not get another fast pass until then. The solution to this was allowing guests to receive an additional fast pass 2 hours after receiving their initial one. Some less than honest guests found that they could simply keep their fast passes from previous days or trips and reuse them over and over again. To combat this, Disney changed the design of fast pass tickets to more clearly show the day, although this did not entirely curb the practice. Others found ways to best the system to get as many fast passes as possible. Guests found that some attractions did not communicate with the rest of the park's computers. So if they were to get a fast pass from one of these rogue attractions, they would not communicate that the guest already held a fast pass and they could therefore obtain another. Fast pass kiosks were also used in creative ways. For instance, guests obtaining a fast pass for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Play It might have received a special ticket inviting them to sit in one of the special contestant seats at the attraction. Sometimes the kiosks were used to direct people to other attractions by giving them a bonus fast pass, such as the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which sometimes dispensed bonus fast passes for Mickey's PhilharMagic. On February 17, 2003, the 100 millionth Fast Pass was distributed to the Dillon family of Atlanta, who were given a special golden Fast Pass that allowed them Fast Pass access to all attractions at the resort. Mike Dillon said, quote, "Things like this don't happen to the Dillons." On a particularly stormy night in the year 1871, Jebediah Dillon stowed away on a cargo ship named the Queen Marge, which would soon navigate the tumultuous waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Bound for the... Whoa, I think I lost my thread here. Sorry about that. Where was I? By 2003, FastPass had grown significantly to 26 attractions at Walt Disney World, 5 at Animal Kingdom, 6 at Disney MGM, 5 at Epcot, and 10 at Magic Kingdom. Disneyland Resort now had a total of 16 FastPass attractions, 9 at Disneyland, and 7 at California Adventure. The significant increase in FastPass attractions was due less to logistics and more to the monetary benefits of the system. During the late 90s and early 2000s, Paul Pressler, the chairman of Walt Disney Parks and Resorts, had instituted drastic cost-cutting measures, slashing budgets across the board to increase profits. At the same time, Pressler, whose background was in retail, dramatically increased the amount of shopping and merchandise carts throughout the parks. FastPass was a quick fix in many ways. Not only did the system promise to get guests out of line and into gift shops, but FastPass itself could be marketed far and wide as if it were a new attraction, during a time when Disney didn't have anything else to promote. For a period of time in the mid-2000s, FastPass was used as a perk for vacation packages, namely ones booked through AAA, which allowed guests access to what was referred to as Enhanced FastPass, which removed the 2-hour limit on guest tickets, allowing them to obtain as many FastPasses as available, with the only restriction being that they could not receive multiple passes for the same attraction until the first pass for that attraction had expired. With this, guests could enter Disneyland Park in the morning, obtain a FastPass for every FastPass attraction in the park, exit Disneyland Park, walk over to California Adventure, obtain a Fast Pass for every Fast Pass attraction at that park, and now, holding 16 Fast Passes, have the best day ever, with the only downside being that they now have to experience 7 attractions at a mid-2000s California Adventure. The over-implementation of FastPass did exactly what Stafford had predicted, and walkways at the parks were more congested than ever. This was especially noticeable at Disneyland, which is a much smaller park in comparison to the Magic Kingdom. The park was designed to have people waiting in line, but now, with most attractions using FastPass, guests found themselves wading through a sea of people, all waiting for their return time to arrive. Also, standby waits for high-capacity attractions, such as Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion, were noticeably increased with FastPass. In 2002, Paul Pressler resigned to model for The Gap, where he would also serve as CEO. He was replaced by the chairman of Disneyland Paris, Jay Rasulo. When Rasulo and other management took over, they reevaluated Disneyland's FastPass system, determining that the best solution was to begin removing FastPasses from certain attractions. At Disneyland, Pirates of the Caribbean, Winnie the Pooh, and Star Tours had its FastPass kiosks removed, and Haunted Mansion's FastPass would only be utilized for Haunted Mansion Holiday. In California Adventure, It's Tough to Be a Bug and Muppet Vision had their Fast Passes removed as well. Eventually, the Haunted Mansion at the Magic Kingdom would have its Fast Pass removed. While Fast Pass worked well on some rides and did increase customer satisfaction significantly, the over-implementation within the first few years of its debut seemed to be clear proof that it was a bad idea to put Fast Pass everywhere. It is now September of 2007. It has been 2 years since Bob Iger became the CEO of Disney after an embattled Michael Eisner resigned. FastPass has just turned 8 years old, and Jay Rasulo is still heading the parks division. It has also been recently announced that Disney was patenting a technology that would utilize a centralized computer system to manage FastPass tickets throughout Walt Disney World and Disneyland, allowing guests to obtain FastPasses from their mobile devices, which at the time looked like this. So most of the plans relied on sending text messages to guests. The patent application also stated that the new system could allow, quote, spending per guest at hotels to determine hierarchies of access to FastPass. Disney stated publicly that they had no plans to change FastPass at the moment, merely that they were monitoring how to take advantage of technological developments. However, within the company, executives were formulating plans for a massive project in complete secrecy. In 2007, Jay Rasulo and 4 other senior Disney Parks officials formed an exploratory committee to determine how the ongoing technological revolution could reinvent the guest experience. Like Walt Disney and Imagineers in the 1960s and like Bruce Lavelle in the 1990s, discussions once again centered on how to improve crowd control and wait times. The group was exploring multiple concepts when one member had an epiphany. While on a flight, VP of Business Development Don Padgett was browsing through the in-flight magazine Sky Mall when he came across a magnetic wristband that promised to improve balance and reduce joint pain. This was, of course, a scam, but it gave Padgett an idea. What if Disney park guests had their own wristband that contained technology that they could use around the park? It would be like a magic wristband, so naturally, they called it the Experience Band, or X-Band for short. The team opened a testing space for X-Band in the abandoned Body Wars attraction in the Wonders of Life Pavilion at Epcot. After an ideation phase, Disney CEO Bob Iger was given a tour where the team explained their idea for the X-Band. Their proposal was to house an RFID tag inside the band that would allow guests to interact with touch points throughout the park. The X-Band could act as guest park tickets or their hotel room keys. They could even use it as a credit card. When Iger was shown the technology, he was impressed enough to give the project a proper budget. In 2008, development officially began on Disney Next Gen Experience, an initiative that promised to bring the guest experience into the modern age. This encompassed multiple strategies, ranging from reinventing the way guests order food at the parks to experimenting with different queue types to increase guest enjoyment while in line. Perhaps the most ambitious part of Next Gen was My Magic Plus, a complete overhaul of Walt Disney World's technological infrastructure and the introduction of a new website and mobile application.
Ever wish you could get the magic of the parks right at your fingertips?
Wait, what is this?
Thanks to Disney Parks.
This is not My Magic Plus. I don't know what this is.
Introducing Mobile Magic, a magical app that will turn your Verizon mobile phone into...
Exclusive to Verizon.
And it's super easy to use. Just touch characters. Look, Mickey now just down.
Oh gosh, I forgot about this. Okay, so real quick, in 2009, Disney and Verizon partnered on a new mobile app named Mobile Magic that allowed guests to see a map of the park, view show times, and play trivia for $9.99 every 180 days. Jeez. And you had to send a text message to download the app? Most impressive, the app allowed users to view wait times and FastPass return times from their phone, with real-time information from the park's computer system. They could not book or view their FastPasses from the app, but this was still a powerful tool for the time, and it had a valuable feature. Guests could now balk at an attraction's wait time from the other side of the park. Understanding the power the app had over guest decisions, Disney began to inflate posted wait times to point guests in certain directions. For instance, if there were too many people in Tomorrowland, Space Mountain's posted wait time might be adjusted to 90 minutes despite the actual wait only being 60, in order to dissuade guests from visiting the crowded area of the park. This also served the additional function of improving guest satisfaction, as actual waits were almost always shorter than posted waits, and it gave ride operators a buffer in the event of delays or downtime. It is unclear when this strategy began, but it would become an integral part of My Magic Plus's crowd control features when the new app launched. In November of 2009, 2 years into the development of Next Gen Experience, it was announced that Jay Rasulo would become the CFO of the Walt Disney Company, switching places with then CFO Tom Staggs, who would be taking Rasulo's position as the head of the Disney parks. The switch was Iger's decision, and it was done to see which executive adjusted better to their new role. This was a way to help Iger determine his successor, as he planned to retire from the company in 2015. Staggs was inheriting the next-gen program and MyMagic+, and the pressure was immediately on for him to deliver on the team's plans, which had only become more ambitious. Not only did the next-gen team want to reinvent park tickets and hotel keys, they wanted to completely overhaul FastPass as well. The new system would be titled XPass, and it was a key feature of next-gen's Guaranteed Experience initiative. The philosophy behind guaranteed experiences was to increase customer satisfaction and guest retention at the resort by removing unwanted variability in vacations. The program sought to ensure that guests would be able to eat at their favorite restaurants and ride their favorite rides during their trip. This is where XPass came in. Guests would now be able to book multiple FastPasses before they arrived at the park, and rather than using paper tickets, they would use their X-bands to enter the expedited queue. In late 2011, news broke on XPass, mainly focusing on a rumor that FastPass would cost money. People took that great, but despite the uproar, the rumor turned out to not be true, at least not entirely. FastPass would still be available to everyone, but priority access would be given to those staying at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel. The plan was for guests to be able to book between 2 and 4 FastPasses before they arrived. The specific number would be different for each park and would vary based on attendance. On the busiest days at Magic Kingdom, guests would only be allowed to book 3 FastPasses, but on most days, they would be able to book 4. However, at Epcot, which had significantly less attractions, guests would only get to book 2 FastPasses on busy days, while most days they would get to book 3. The times for the reservations would be determined by guest preferences. Guests would input which attractions they wanted to ride, and an itinerary would be created with FastPasses to optimize guest flow throughout the park. When paired with the rest of the next-gen technology, this had the potential to radically redesign crowd control. There was just one problem. Actually, there were 1,000 problems, but this was one of them. XPass sought to offer multiple FastPasses to the majority of guests before their arrival. The problem was there were not enough FastPasses available at the resort's FastPass attractions to do this. In the original FastPass system, popular attractions would run out of FastPasses for the day by noon or even before, and that was when people could only obtain one FastPass every 2 hours. Since FastPass already took up the majority of a ride's capacity, and most rides at Walt Disney World were already operating at maximum capacity, it was not feasible to simply give out more FastPasses for these rides. When the industrial engineers ran the models for XPass, it was apparent that there was not enough FastPass availability at the parks for the system to work. The engineers quickly realized that in order to offer multiple FastPasses to guests before they arrived, they would need to add FastPass to nearly every attraction at the resort. The total number of FastPass attractions at Walt Disney World would increase from 28 to 50. When the industrial engineers put the increased FastPass availability into the model, it still didn't work. Even with an additional 22 attractions, there were still numerous days throughout the year where FastPass availability would be gone before a significant amount of guests could book all of their passes. To solve this, it was suggested that FastPass be added not just to every attraction, but also to things that were not typically considered attractions, such as meet and greets with characters. Apparently, this still wasn't enough, so it was suggested that guests could obtain FastPasses to things that don't even have lines, such as fireworks shows or parades. Rather than skipping the line, special viewing areas would be created for these experiences, and guests could book a FastPass to gain access to them. Finally, this increased, or more accurately inflated, the amount of FastPasses that could be offered, which helped support the idea to offer multiple FastPasses to guests before they arrived. With the basic framework figured out, plans moved forward on XPass as Next Gen and MyMagic+ continue to develop. In February of 2011, the Walt Disney Company's board of directors approved MyMagic+ with a budget of around $1 billion. Iger reportedly sternly told Staggs, quote, "This better work," which became a mantra for the entire team. Staggs was under enormous pressure to deliver on a project that didn't really make the parks or Disney money.
Now, when I put this in, does money immediately begin flowing out of my checking account?
If it's working correctly, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
In a shocking twist, most of the rhetoric surrounding Next Gen and MyMagic+ internally was not about the potential profit from the system. Those developing the new technology, and even much of the executive team, believed in the more altruistic benefits of the program. The ability to guarantee experiences for vacationers, to simplify the experience of visiting the resort, to improve traffic flow and crowd control at the parks, to create an IT infrastructure that could be built on over the coming decades, even to make cast members' jobs easier so they could focus more on providing great interactions with guests. These were the key components of the pitch. This is not to say that there were not some ulterior motives. Disney definitely wanted to impress with the program to establish themselves as a major player in the tech space, but this did not create a clear path to generate income. Apart from the new digital PhotoPass system, which had direct monetary benefits, the revenue that the billion-dollar MyMagic Plus overhaul would generate was almost entirely theoretical. Maybe guests would think less about their purchases when using their X-Bands, which would then lead to more spending. Maybe the novelty of the X-Band would encourage more people to stay at Walt Disney World resorts, which would increase revenue. Maybe the data collected from everyone's X-Bands and account profiles could be leveraged in ways to increase spending. Maybe a few cast member positions could be automated with the system, which would save money. Maybe the traffic flow improvements would be so great that more guests could fit into the park. And the biggest maybe that the entire project was predicated on, maybe MyMagic Plus would create such a wonderful experience for our guests that they would be more likely to return and more likely to recommend that others visit. Sure, the end goal was to increase revenue, but Disney's focus was on improving the guest experience and hoping that the money would come as a result. This optimistic and almost quaint approach seemed to be at odds with the $1 billion price tag, but Iger, Staggs, Rasulo, and other executives believed in the program enough to keep it going. Others throughout Disney had a much different opinion, which quickly led to infighting. Disney hired multiple tech contractors to manufacture and deliver much of the MyMagic Plus technology, and it was an open secret in the tech industry that they hired subpar firms that saw the project as a cash cow, overcharging and under-delivering. These firms also did not get along with the park's IT team, especially when major issues were found with implementation. Walt Disney Imagineering was not all in on the MyMagic Plus technology either. The parks hoped that the Imagineers would take advantage of the X-Band technology to deliver unique experiences in attractions, but Imagineering viewed the X-Bands as a gimmick, and a risky one at that. Plus, placing X-Band readers throughout the park's land so that guests could redeem fast passes clashed with the theming. Imagineer Joe Rohde said, quote, "If I'm supposed to be living with fairies, fairies don't have iPhones or Magic Bands." The Imagineers ended up barely integrating the X-Bands into new attractions, with Epcot's test track being one of the only real benefactors.
What's FastPass Plus, you ask? Come on, I'll show you. It makes your stay a treat. Reserve that meet and greet. Come on, get it now. Make your trip a wow, it's sweet.
That is technically my second favorite FastPass parody song, but it's really not even a competition. In January of 2013, Disney officially announced the creation of MyMagic Plus, along with the introduction of the new high-tech wristbands, now renamed to Magic Bands. X-Pass was also announced, renamed to FastPass Plus. The system had been altered slightly, and it would allow guests to book 3 Fast Passes in advance. This static number applied to all 4 parks rather than X-Pass's proposed dynamic system. As rumored, guests staying at Walt Disney World Resort hotels would get early access to Fast Passes. Hotel guests would be able to book their Fast Passes 60 days in advance, while everyone else could book theirs 30 days in advance. When guests went to book their Fast Passes, they were given a list of attractions that had Fast Pass available. They then selected 3 of them. No more, no less. If the guests didn't select 3, the system picked 2 at random. After the selections were made, the computer would intelligently create multiple itineraries that guests could choose from. After this, guests could still edit the selections, either by changing the time of the FastPass reservation or by selecting another attraction within the initial attraction's time frame. Fast Passes were now redeemed with Magic Bands or guest park tickets, but during the initial rollout, paper Fast Pass kiosks would still be available. MyMagic Plus was introduced in phases throughout 2013 and early 2014, and issues with the system were immediate.